Oh, yeah.
So yeah,
I have some stuff to say about that too. About long drives, but are we moving into Colorado now?
let us move on to Colorado.
All right. So the first thing I'm going to say right off the bat is the most interesting thing that happened to me at Colorado is something that had nothing to do with the main event. But I will talk about that after I tell you about the main event because I like to tease people. So, basically, here's the deal. There have been a number of very controversial things that have come out of the Colorado Regional, both dealing with myself and some other issues in general. We're not going to talk about those. If you're interested, I put up an AAR on Board Game Geek. It has over 100 replies at this point talking about these various things. But the short version is we need more transparent standings and a much clearer set of floor rules. And well, you'll see what I have to say on that front. So let me talk about exactly what happened with Colorado. I had expected this to be both the largest and the most developed meta of all the regionals thus far, and I was absolutely correct. We had 32 signed up, 26 ended up playing, which was more than ended up playing. You guys had 22 in North Carolina, is that correct?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Right, but the other thing is, and I'm going to give him a shout out here because he's a pretty stand-up guy. Colorado has Sean Keenan. Now, if you don't know who Sean Keenan is, you probably are not in the Star Trek Attack Wing community on Facebook. Sean Keenan is a guy. He's a great guy in real life, stand-up guy, very, very sharp, and he is what in Magic we would call a brewmaster. He is very good at developing rogue builds that are going to shake up the meta a little bit. And it was actually while his friend Carl, who is a really sweet guy, ended up putting me up for the night when I didn't want to drive home 6 hours at 11 o'clock at night. Carl actually didn't put me up, but Carl was piloting one of Sean's builds. So what that ended up being was Colorado had a lot of stuff that I had not expected, and I had to sort of adjust my game plan to handle. With that said, I expected in this meta the prevalent ones to be Dual Spheres, Picard Ducat, Wave's Conditional Surrender Attack Cancellation, and Voyager Dreadnought. And so because of that, what I ended up taking was Borg Sphere 4270 with a reroll tactical drone, a generic Borg Sphere with a tactical drone and a Borg missile, same tactical drone, and that's it. It's very similar. In fact, I think it's the same as a build that took second place in San Diego at a very close finals, and I felt that it was very well poised against this meta. My blind was the Scout Cube, which of course caused me no end of happiness. Number one, because I got Dissipation Field, which I needed, and number two, because we are the Borg, and so I got to say that all day. I was hoping for Scout Cube or for the Vulcan. I need 2 copies of the Vulcan because my girlfriend wants one because the blind Vulcan comes with Fat Vulcan, and I desperately want to get her a copy of that. Yeah. So let's just get started with what I saw, and then there's one other thing. There's one other build I want to give a shout out to that I ended up playing that I did see. So my first round was against a guy named Will.
Not
Will,
me.
not Will co-host, and not Will Holmesclaw, who's another guy I will mention later on. We'll use his last initial. He's Will B. He ran a Soong with Picard 9, Battleship Alpha with the Borg Queen, and a Dakir class with Solok and Power Grid. This did not go very well for him. I mean,
so Picard, I assume, got targeted by Borg missile real quick.
I mean it. with the planet, it was just ugly. The planet was my best friend all day.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you something. If you think, coming from Gen Con or something, that double sphere, double tac drone, one missile is good against double sphere Picard Ducat with no planet, let me tell you how good it is against Bioship Sung with a planet. I mean, he got one damage card on one of my ships, and that was it. And I swept him.
Borg love planets so much.
Borg love planets so much, and Borg love planets, especially when opponents are both running 90-degree fire arcs. I mean, it just didn't. It was not good.
Mm-hmm.
It was not good. It was ugly. The other thing I want to say about this is, guys, don't build your blind this way. Please don't build your blind this way.
The Vulcan was using Solok, Captain?
Generic Solok power grid. There is no action economy there. There's no any. Just run the Talkir. If you have to run Solok, run Solok. I would much prefer. 6. Yeah, I would much prefer the photonic weapon or Cobb, but don't. It's not a combo, you guys. It's really not.
Nothing in this ship works well together.
Every single opponent I had who ran Dakir Solok power grid, and I think I had 2 of them, so both of them, I should say, tried at some point to double evade. Don't do it.
Oops.
No. Okay, let's move on. The next round was against Aaron, also running one of Sean Keenan's builds. And this is a very interesting build. Because this build, when I saw the build sheet, scared the bejesus out of me. Okay? It was generic Burrell, Martok 9, generic Katinga with tech, Gowron, projected stasis field, the Chitang with the Natra, projected stasis field, and just to hit 90 points exactly, Clag. Who I guess is also meta against Varel if they don't have cost for some reason. Anyway, his blind buy was the Prakash, Tashiar, and dorsal weapons. Aaron is a great guy. Aaron, after the Swiss ended, went and got me and Carl food because we couldn't leave because we didn't have time. So Aaron, in my mind, is a saint. Unfortunately, to be totally frank, between how badly I beat him in round 2 and how badly I think Will Holmesclaw beat him in round 3, he actually quit the game. So
wait, what happened?
Well, here's what happened. I was terrified of this build until he split his forces, deploying Martok and Dinatra on one side of the planet and Gowron and the Prakash on the other.
Oh.
Yeah, it was ugly.
Oops.
I cheerfully engaged the Gowron Prakash side. He was never able to get projected stasis field up. To use a Magic the Gathering turn of phrase, I sort of mind tricked him into not using Tasha Yar. And
this is not the card you want to use?
No, it's basically if there's an optional trigger, if you do things like ask questions about the next thing to do, their mind logically moves past that if they're not used to playing with the card. So I'm like, I shoot back. I'm like, all right, no more ships to shoot. Maneuvers? And he's like, yeah, maneuvers. I'm like, you will not use Tashiar's trigger. I just did the little Jedi gesture there. You can't see it. Anyway. So the other thing he did is he thought for some reason after I engaged, this was the thing that happened all day. He thought after I engaged but before I killed the Katinga and the Parkesh, he thought I was going to fly through the planet. After I had engaged but not destroyed these ships. I have no idea why he thought that. People seem to think all day that I was going to do that, and I didn't.
It's like, why would I run away? I want you dead.
Well, see, yeah, exactly. And what happened was he maneuvered his ships in such a way. He did come about on one of them, and hard turn on the other, and I think one or both of them ended up with auxiliary power tokens. They did hit each other, and they were completely out of position to help his other two ships. So instead of sending, I mean, if he had got those other ships around in time, I might have been in real trouble, because 2 times projected stasis field, it turns out, is very scary. Mm-hmm. But even though he only got he got one of them off at one point. He got Denatras off after I had blown up both his other ships, and he managed to come back around. But unfortunately, it was too little, too late. He got the scout cube. I got everything else, and I was 2-0 and 240. As I'm going through my board game, as I'm going through this, I'm looking on my Board Game Geek report. This was also the game where I noticed that at this point I had so little sleep, had been driving for so long, and was so heavily caffeinated that when I held my hand out, I actually could not physically stop it from shaking.
You're supposed to sleep before the event and not sleep on the way home. That's how I did it.
That was not really an option for me because I didn't have anywhere to stay before I went to Colorado. If I had known Carl before I went to Colorado, I would have asked if I crashed with him before the event. Because let me tell you, he was a swell guy. He was my round 3 opponent. And let me just talk about this because he was. All
right, so this is the champions list then.
This is the champions list. This is the champions list. He was my round 3 opponent, and here's what his list was. He ran USS Voyager. Okay, hold on a sec. I'm getting a lot of static from somebody.
Is that coming from me?
I can't tell.
Maybe, but
I'm not sure.
We can still hear everything fine around here, so let's keep going.
All right. I'll roll through. So his list was the following: USS Voyager, with lore for Vulcan High Command. Mm-hmm. Admiral Kirk carrying invaluable advice. Reliant Chekhov, Shelby, Croesus, Koss, Amataglon, Transphasics, and multi-adaptive shields. His blind was Prakesh, Tashiar, dorsal weapons away. But here's the interesting part. He had a sideboard, and his sideboard was Wayun 6, Varel, Conditional Surrender, and Cloaked Mines. Well.
Dan, you look confused.
You gotta remember, I'm not that deep in the tactics like you guys are. I'm just trying to think of all these things coming together. I'm just like, wow, that's a lot of stuff to keep track of.
Well, let me tell you exactly how it worked, because I saw it in action. The first thing is, Chris Guild ruled that if you take lore off a ship with Vulcan High Command doesn't discard its extra slots. So his plan was almost immediately to just switch out lore for Wayun 6 in almost every case. Then trade somebody else out for Varel. Amataglon if their opponent is not Borg. Amataglon if the opponent's Borg. Shelby if the opponent's Borg. If not, is not Borg. Croesus maybe if they don't have anything worth stealing. Like for example, against my build, he traded out Croesus because there's nothing on my ships that Croesus can target. In the end,
you have a ship with Wayun and 6 crew that love him.
Right, and so the other thing was that Amataglon instead of Gaval is, in my opinion, a rather inspired choice. Because Koss plus Amataglon is almost as annoying as you can get when you can't run Vic Fontaine, Dispersion Field, or any of the above. Mm-hmm. I might personally... He was going for high evade, and I could see that. Otherwise, I might have actually run Stex. I'll wait where everybody goes to look up Stex. Stex is the guy that says if a crew upgrade, it's a 2-point Klingon crew. If a crew upgrade on an enemy ship would cause you to discard or disable any of your upgrades, roll 2 defense dice. If you roll at least 1 evade result, ignore the effects. He works against Croesus because Croesus has to disable a crew first, unless Croesus goes for attack. There's other interesting interactions there. Anyway, his game plan. Now, I will say this: due to various ruling-related things, which I don't want to get into, he was allowed to use to pull 1 thing off the sideboard per ship per turn.
That's not right.
I don't want to get into that. But what he ended up doing is he ended up, first turn, he would get Weiyun and he'd get Cloaked Mines for the Prakesh. And that served him very well.
Oh, I can imagine.
In our match, I made a maneuvering mistake, and there was a Borg pileup very early on. The other thing that happened was I was about 3 millimeters out from being protected from a transphasic shot from the planet, and that ended up costing me a sphere.
Interesting. You made sure he got his power tokens for those reinforcements, right?
Sorry?
You made sure he took the power token for those reinforcements, right?
Oh, absolutely he did, but it was early enough in the game that both of us... So what happened was both of us were playing the long-distance maneuvers game, and then the judge walks by and is like, oh, hey, so the venue asked us to cut the round by 15 minutes. And we just look at each other, and we start going right at each other.
What?
Yeah.
In the middle of the event.
In the middle of a round.
In the middle of the last round of the Swiss.
Yeah. That's what I recall happening anyway. And, yeah, it was... He might not have said exactly that. He might have just said... Or maybe he said something like, you have 15 minutes left, and we're like, what? And he's like, yeah, the venue cut the time or something. I don't know exactly what it was. But the last round was shorter. As I said, there were some issues. I don't want to talk about them here. But it caused a radical shift of tactics, which is why initially he was taking aux tokens and it didn't matter, and then we got into close quarters. He ended up taking this match with 120 points. I ended up with 90. 2-1, 330 was enough to put me in the top 8. And that is all we will say on that subject.
Indeed.
So, we didn't have time to eat at all still.
You got a bite of meatloaf. There was supposed to be like an hour for dinner between their scheduled.
Yeah, that didn't happen.
At least I got my meatloaf burger.
Yeah, I actually had meatloaf too.
There was a great burger place just right around the corner. I loved it. If you're ever in North Carolina near Cape Fear Games, go to the burger place around the corner.
Round 2 opponent Aaron was friends with Carl, and Carl and I had him run to Boston Market.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Love Boston. And let me tell you something. When I finally got to eat that food, oh God, it was like the most delicious meal I'd ever had. So quarterfinals. I ran against a guy named Andrew, who ran the Portland list. I'm not even going to bother telling you. It was the Portland list with the Vulcan build that you shouldn't take. The sector condition was meteor shower. And in general, I only got his blind, which was enough to win because he didn't get anything in mine. If we had had a little bit longer, I probably would have gotten his cube too. This was not a good match for him. The only reason his cube even lived is because he used his conduit to run away, but he just wasn't winning the match at that point.
How did you get around Beryl for the first missile shot?
Well, the thing was, I never got around Beryl for a missile shot, but it turns out that just shooting at him with 6 attack dice with a free reroll every turn is actually enough to get there. And remember, my scout cube was also shooting too. So
I gotcha.
he was shooting at me, and I was taking some damage, whatever. But I was shooting with his dice quality was just not as good as mine because he had to spend his action every single turn to re-able Weiyun. So
to save 1 attack.
I was shooting.
Oh my gosh! That also meant he was shooting last. Well,
no, he was shooting first because.
Oh right, because he re-enables, he shoots first. Okay, never mind. Right,
exactly. But it didn't end up mattering because he would shoot and then I would shoot with Borg missile or no, I would shoot with regular sphere and he had to let it through. He couldn't disable for that attack because Borg missile was on deck, right? And then what ended up here's the best part. So he'd take 6 damage with rerolls, which by the way, getting rerolls every single turn is really good. Really good.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would shoot at, with the Borg Missile Sphere, except, well, he's already, he's saving his attack cancellation. I'm just not going to use Borg Missile. So he canceled that attack. And then my Scout Cube would shoot with 3 dice. And sure, that's not much, but it'll get there, especially when I also have 9 other dice attacking. And the Scout Cube was target locking every turn because it didn't have anything better to do. So, yeah, he was taking 9 dice with rerolls every single turn. And it took a while to get through the 17 freaking durability that Cube 138 has. But, I would have got there eventually if he hadn't transwarped. I mean, so, yeah.
So that round he ran away, and you ended up with 30-0 because you just got his Dekir?
Right, exactly.
Gotcha.
There was a very near repeat of the event in the Portland finals where he stuck my Borg missile cube with a warp core breach. But fortunately, I survived and I could regenerate the crit.
Nice.
But it was close. History almost repeated itself. Okay. Last match was semifinals versus Chris.
Top 4.
Top 4. Chris was running Borg's. So the top 4 was Carl, who we've talked about, me, Matt, who was running the exact same list I was, and this guy, Chris. Chris ran Spear 4270 with the Indy Klingon flagship, Picard, Spock, Feedback Pulse, Projected Stasis Field, Borg Missile, Transwarp Conduit, and the actual good way to be able to Talkir, which was the named ship and the photonic weapon. I can't really talk about this. I can't really talk about this match because something happened in it that is very controversial that eventually, very far down the line, caused me to lose. With that said, it was a good matchup for me. I misplayed, and I should have beat this guy, and I didn't. But I stuck around for the finals, and here's why I had the concerns about the point cost in your build, Will.
Gotcha.
This guy had no way to interact with his opponent's crew.
Oh.
He got to the finals.
Mm-hmm.
Carl very calmly put Wayun
and Vero.
Wayun and Vero on his ship, blew up Chris's blind, and then very carefully explained to him that his build was 120 points, Chris's was 119, he'd blown up Chris's blind, the Borg sphere could only attack once per turn, and was never going to be able to kill Wayun and Vero, so he'd won the match just by blowing up Chris's blind. The finals took maybe 10 minutes, maybe.
Oh. What happened to the most developed metagame?
Well, that was the thing. Chris had some interesting things. Projected Stasis Field is really good, and I'm surprised we haven't seen it thus far. There's another build I want to bring up, which was Will Holmesclaw's build, and he ran the Chitang. He top-8'd. He lost in the quarterfinals to Carl, the eventual winner. And that match went to time, and Carl only won by 6 fleet points. So it was very close.
Or what do you have of the build?
I had the whole thing, and it was Will brought the Chitang with the Klingon flagship, not the Independent, the Klingon flagship.
Okay.
Picard, interface generator, aft particle beam, Teeny Prize Montgomery Scott, and Elizabeth Shelby. Then a Cavort with Wayun 6 and Croesus.
What kind of Borg? Just a sphere?
No, not a Borg. Cavort.
Oh, a Cavort.
A Cavort. Yes, the generic Karaga.
Huh. So
right?
2 birds of prey?
2 birds of prey. The Chitang and a generic Cavort. And he apparently did very well in this. He and Carl were the only 2 3-0s. And he did he says that it's very funny that everybody referred to him as the Klingon fleet because the two ships and the flagship were the only Klingon parts of the cards. But it's just a very different build, and I think it's interesting he did as well with it as he did. Now, obviously, this isn't a build that's possible in the non-regionals meta. Attack cancellation can deal with two ships really easily. But in the regionals meta, he called it, by the way, since the crew was entirely Federation on the Chitang, he called it the HMS Bounty build, which I kind of like.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's an interesting build. I think people should maybe consider it to play around with. So that's basically what happens. I have an interview with the winner. If Will wants to run that, we can just play that. I got an interview with Carl.
And let's see. Interview. I think this is the right one.
Hi, this is Tucker from State of the Federation. I'm here with Carl Godwin, winner of the Colorado Star Trek Attack Wing National Qualifier. Carl, how you feeling?
I'm feeling very excited and very tired. I just got to eat right now.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Carl and I both didn't get to eat until the end of, well, I didn't get to eat until the end of the top four, and Carl didn't get to eat until after the tournament was over. So, let me ask you a few questions. So your build could have been defined essentially as a Voyager Dreadnought, but you made the very interesting choice of running a Wayun, Varel, Conditional Surrender, and Cloaked Mind sideboard. What led you to that decision?
Well, the Cloaked Mind decision was coming from the fact that if Klingons were on the table, that would be one of my worst matches. So I wanted the Cloaked Minds to force them to go another way or have to run into them while cloaked to take the damage. The Wayun Vero Conditional Surrender is a have an answer for Croesus. For the opposing Croesus, beside the fact that I had my own Croesus on the ship, I wanted to make sure to be able to keep my combo despite whatever they had originally planned for it.
That makes a lot of sense. So you were expecting a lot of Klingons and Croesus in this meta?
In my meta, I was expecting a lot of Evade Voyagers, Klingons to be on the table, and Wayun Varel that I had to compete against.
And how much of that did you see today?
I saw absolutely everything I expected to see today. There were no surprises for me today.
And the results definitely show that. Now, let me ask you a quick question about the top four. The top four of this event was you with Wayun Varel Voyager, a Picard Sphere, and two sets of 2x Borg Sphere with a Borg missile between them and tac drones on each. What do you think this says, if anything, about the health of the meta right now?
Well, I don't think the regionals can determine the health of the meta because they don't allow us to have so many other cards that have come into the meta now that totally are going to be game-changing going forward.
I think that's a very valid point. But what do you think, since we still have a couple of regional events to go, that this says about the regional event meta?
Well, for the regional event meta, you're going to either have to play Wayun Varel or be ready to play against it. That's pretty much what you're down to for the regionals.
I think that's an entirely fair assessment. So one last question, Carl. What's next for you now that you've won?
Play more attack wing casually. I actually don't play a lot of competitive attack wing. I table 600 and 900 point games at my house here with Sean Keenan and Aaron Cornelia. We play a lot of casual attack wing.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Well, thanks very much for sitting down with me.
You're welcome. You have a good night.
You too.
Cool.
Yeah, I thought he had some interesting things to say. I wanted to let him say it in his own words. He did, by the way, he just messaged me on Facebook, and he said that Will's build only beat Carl's because of the meteor shower condition, which meant he had to drop cloak, which meant that he could be transphasics.
Ouch. Oh, that hurts. Meteor showers.
Yeah. But I
was really looking forward to him say, "What are you going to do now?" I wanted to hear him say, "I'm going to Disney World."
You know, I may have had that in mind when I asked that question. I will not confirm or deny that.
Hey, I could have legitimately said that. I live in Florida. Come on now.
Yeah, no, I hear that. Well, I'm getting an echo now. Hold on. Let me see who it's from.
It might be me.
Yeah, I think it's from you, Dan. No, it's from Will.
Uh-oh. I'll roll with it.
All right. So there's one other interview I got while I was at Colorado. And that interview was with Justin Zoran, the president of WizKids. Now,
here's our surprise, guys.
For licensing purposes, they have to run the interview by the license holders of Star Trek. So we're not able to run the entire thing tonight. But I have been authorized to make a very awesome announcement.